So apparently the lack of educated men is preventing well-educated women from starting families. And before you object, remember the golden rule. When women experience disadvantage, it's men's fault. And when men are disadvantaged, it's also men's fault, otherwise known as the patriarchy. Shortage of eligible men has left women taking desperate steps to preserve their fertility, experts say. A dearth of marriageable men has left an oversupply of educated women taking desperate steps to preserve their fertility, experts say. The first global study into egg freezing found that shortages of eligible men were the prime reason why women had attempted to take matters into their own hands. You've got to give the author credit. Didn't even ease into it, absolved women of any responsibility, and shifted the burden onto men, all in the first 2 paragraphs. Now, we should be a little hesitant here. First off, this study has not been published. It was presented at the European Society of Human Reproduction and Embryology Conference in Geneva, Switzerland by Marcia Inhorn, Professor of Anthropology and International Affairs at Yale University. So all we have are a few articles which are notoriously bad at presenting scientific findings and a few screenshots from Marcia Inhorn herself. So not a lot to go on here, but I would note the following. Limitations. Participation in this study was voluntary, so perhaps a self-selection problem. Sampling was not random, and the response rate was unquantifiable. So that's a little weird. How did you solicit responses? You could have controlled the research such that you knew how many women were approached to participate in this extensive interview process. But hey, I guess we'll find out when it finally gets published. The sample size was 150, 114 women from the US and 36 from Israel, taken from 4 clinics in each country. Now, there are over 1,000 fertility clinics in the United States, more than 163 in California alone, so I'm not sure this is a representative sample size. But anyway, experts said terrifying demographic shifts had created a deficit of educated men and a growing problem of leftover professional women, with female graduates vastly outnumbering males in many countries. Now notice how this is framed. If there are leftover women, that means there must also be leftover men, and by definition, less educated men. But that's not important because remember, problems are only problems if they affect women. Researchers found that in more than 90% of cases, the women were attempting to buy extra time because they could not find a partner to settle down with amid a dearth of educated men. Experts said the research busts the myth that selfish career women were choosing to put their fertility on ice in a bid to put their careers first. Well, who says that women are selfish for putting their careers first? It sounds suspiciously like that straw man feminists use in sexual assault cases, where supposedly every woman gets asked, what was she wearing? I mean, who actually says that? Who thinks women are being selfish? I don't see it like that. I see it as a trade-off, like most things in life. The later in life you leave it to have children, the more difficult it'll be not only to get pregnant, but to find a partner. There's not a right or wrong decision here. There's just a trade-off. Maybe it's because women have been told they can have it all and that it comes as a shock to them that most probably can't. I suppose it's sexist to point out that women are more attractive in their mid to late 20s than in their mid to late 30s or early 40s. But of course, it's not sexist to say that men aren't educated enough for these highly educated women. The reality is there's no dearth of men. It's a matter of, are you willing to lower your almighty standards, ladies? If not, then yeah, a proportion of you are going to miss out. Again, it's all about trade-offs. Now, the author does seem to have a moment of clarity when she says some women might need to be prepared to compromise some of their standards in order to find love. But she suggested society should act to increase the number of men going into higher education. So might have to compromise, but it would be better if they didn't have to. But she goes on, most women who are educated would like to have an educated partner. Now that's true. I don't think someone that's highly educated wants to be with someone who they can't have a conversation with, both men and women. And according to a Pew Research poll, both men and women agree on this in roughly the same numbers when asked whether having at least as much education is important in choosing a spouse or partner. The big difference in the Pew survey is when it comes to a steady job. Slightly less than half of all men think a partner with a steady job is very important, whilst more than 3/4 of women feel that way. And the author acknowledges this. Traditionally, women have also wanted to marry up to go for someone more successful, financially well off. Did she just acknowledge the existence of hypergamy? Maybe women need to be prepared to be more open to the idea of a relationship with someone not as educated, but also maybe we need to do something about our boys and young men to get them off to a better start. Some women were paying a high price for feminism, she suggested. As a feminist, I think it's great that women are doing so well, but I think there's been a cost that has been paid, she said, warning that many had been left in sadness and isolation. So I'm not sure if I should give her credit for being concerned about the welfare of boys and men, because it seems that the only reason to be concerned about them is so that women aren't sad and isolated. In some cases, the women taking part in the in-depth interviews said they would be happy to be in a relationship with someone less educated, but they felt they were intimidating to the men who were available. Keyword there, felt. Further down the page, we get this same claim from A1 Professor Geeta Nagand, director of UK clinics Create Fertility. Women tell us frequently they are freezing their eggs because the men they meet feel threatened by their success and so unwilling to commit to starting a family together. Now, I guess that could be true, but it would be interesting to get the other side of the story from the men. Martin Dobney has another theory. This is what he wrote on the topic in Heat Street. Having forlornly waited decades for Mr. Right, haunted by the tick-tock of their biological clocks, these women instead now want a Mr. Right Now, who's basically a walking sperm donor. Perhaps unsurprisingly, many men don't want to play that game, especially those ultra-desirable, highly educated alpha males these women covet. What the Yale team have spectacularly failed to grasp is that these men aren't intimidated by these careerists. Increasingly, they just don't want them. But why not? Firstly, they're growing wary of women who have decided, I'm ready. What man wants to go straight from Tinder to the kids section of IKEA without a few years fun first? It's sensible risk avoidance, making sure she's mother material. Only she doesn't want to wait, 'cause fertility, so men avoid them. We're all increasingly making more informed choices later in life, so it's a bit rich to claim it's a bad thing when men do it. You can't have it both ways, ladies. Instead, these men are increasingly dating younger women, not because they're shallow sexists, but because they don't want to have children yet. Again, their body, their choice. Doubly so when their reproductive clocks can be ticking strong as they turn into grandfather clocks. Now, Martin provides no data to back his claims on this, but it seems like a plausible explanation for some. I can't help feel there's a level of entitlement involved in a woman expecting in her mid to late 30s for men to come running because she now feels ready. But let's go back to the original article. Typically, it costs around £10,000 to freeze eggs and keep them in storage for 10 years in the UK. So obviously this is something out of reach for a lot of women. And although IVF has been around for a while, there's still a 75% failure rate. And I got this from an article titled Elective Egg Freezing, Offering Empowerment or False Hope. For every 10 eggs that are frozen and thawed, 2 to 4 will develop to early embryo stage, day 2 to 3, and possibly only 1 to 2 embryos will progress to the blastocyst stage, day 5. It is conservatively estimated that between 15 and 25 eggs would be required for one baby in a woman who undergoes freezing under the age of 38 years, and this may involve 1 or more cycles of stimulation and cryopreservation. As women age, they will respond to ovarian stimulation with fewer egg numbers, so on the whole, egg freezing is not offered to women over 38 years of age. However, there is room to allow individualisation of decision-making such that if a woman older than 38 has excellent ovarian function with a high yield of eggs expected, the technique can be considered. So the obvious conclusion is, the best chance of having a baby involves spontaneous fertility in the mid to late 20s or very early 30s. This opportunity may not be available to some women for a variety of reasons, and thus fertility preservation by egg freezing may offer these women a realistic chance of having their own child in the future. The magnitude of the additional opportunity will be related to the age of the woman at the time of freezing, the number and the quality of eggs frozen. So in the absence of new or better technology, starting a family is easier if you do it in your 20s or early 30s. It's not rocket science. So are you one of those uneducated men that just aren't cutting it? Or have you decided not to be a token sperm donor? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.